Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the Erich Konzept I. However, of course I've already covered the new gun, so we're going to be looking at the original gun of the Erich Konzept I, which is the 120mm. It did get buffed, of course, having better reload ever so slightly, and of course an extra 20 alpha damage, now up to 380, which definitely makes a fairly big difference in terms of what you can do with this tank, and it has actually done enough for the vehicle on this gun at least. So, of course, I'll just get right into the review with this one. There is, of course, a review on my site if you want to see it without this commentary. So, of course, the armor of this tank is decent, but it's not great. You can see its upper plate is, of course, an auto ricochet, just like the Leichter Kampfpanzer, but this one is actually a fair bit stronger. So tanks with low penetration heat will actually struggle to go through it, such as, for example, the T54 with 270, or this tank itself with the 152mm gun. You can see if you are using just slight bits of gun depression, then that does become quite hard to penetrate for that level of heat penetration, though of course tanks with 300 or higher will have no issue going through that auto ricochet upper plate. But for the majority of cases, enemies will just ricochet off just because it is at such an extreme angle, and generally when enemies see this tank, they aren't going to be firing heat at it. They'll either go through the lower plate or turret with AP, or just bounce off the upper plate. Of course, switching to heat, that upper plate does become weak on flat ground, though when using gun depression it is okay. Something that does have to be mentioned, of course, is this oscillating turret, which, of course, when you do use gun depression, it means that the turret moves with the gun, rather than the turret staying in place and the gun going down, which means your armor doesn't get better. What is good, though, is that on flat ground even, you can raise your turret up, and then it will be very hard for enemies to go through, especially enemies with just the regular level of penetration at tier 9 for medium tanks, which is around the 230-240 mark. You can see here, even when the turret isn't angled, it is still somewhat difficult to penetrate, and of course if you do use enhanced armor, that becomes even more evident. Raising up the turret and then using heat, it can still be quite difficult to penetrate. Of course, that is just a slightly better alternative to showing the whole turret as fully penetrable as shown there. But yeah, you can raise up the turret of this tank, which should be done, of course, if you do want to bounce shots. So, in this video, of course, I'm going to be talking about the 120mm gun. If you want to see the 152mm autoloader, I did already make a video on that. So ammo for this one is AP Heat HE, penetration is 235 on standard, 285 on heat, and 62 on HE. So the standard penetration is decent. It's nothing special for a medium tank at tier 9. Heat is also decent. It's, again, nothing special. It's all right. It's pretty average for a tier 9 medium. Next, alpha damage, 380 on standard, 320 on heat, and 480 on HE. Very normal numbers for such level of alpha damage, and for a tier 9 medium in general, this is pretty nice alpha, as the majority of mediums at tier 9 have between 310 and 350, or 360 I should say. And this one having just that slight bit higher at 380 is pretty nice. It puts it on a roughly similar level to the WZ-120, which has 400 alpha. Reload time for this gun as well is 8.6, which is of course without vents, so using vents you can get that slightly better, giving it 2651 DPM. Aim time is good at 2.9/3, base aim time is great at 1.84 base, and dispersion is also great at 0.326. Gun handling is decent for tier 9. Again, at this tier, medium tanks generally have really good gun handling, so this level is pretty just decent, average. Nothing amazing, but still it's pretty good. Shell velocities are 900 on standard, 1150 on heat, and 850 on HE, and gun depression is 8 degrees. So this gun is pretty nice actually, and I did mention having vents on because Wargaming did buff the DPM of this tank, the reload of this gun, because gun rammer got removed and they were giving it vents due to the autoloader gun. So of course if you do use vents, that DPM goes up by almost 100, which is a fair difference, and it takes the reload down to 8.32. 2740 DPM in tier 9 isn't the best, but it's also not terrible as it was before. Previously it had like 2560 or something DPM, maybe 2600, with 20 less alpha, only 360, which is the same as the Leopard prototype. So now it does have more alpha and more DPM. It definitely makes it more special in terms of what it can actually do in terms of trading and damage in tier 9. Next though, mobility. This tank pretty fast, 55 forwards, 20 in reverse. Traverse speed is also fast at 70 on hard terrain and almost 60 on medium. Acceleration also pretty quick. This is roughly similar to the Scharfrichter 4 in terms of how it feels in mobility, just slightly under the Leopard prototype and of course the AMX 30 prototype. 23.4 horsepower per ton, again pretty good, weighs 44 tons, which isn't extremely light. It means you can do some pretty good ramming against the right enemies, of course. 23.4 on hard terrain, acceleration, and 19.5 on medium, so still pretty good terrain resistances. And it doesn't feel like it's too slow off-road because of those terrain resistances. So of course, for consumables I would put adrenaline, because despite this tank having buffed DPM, it's still not anything impressive at tier 9, especially when you've got tanks like the Leopard prototype, M46 pattern, E50, Type 61 all running around with 330 to 350 alpha and 3000 DPM. You are still at a 250 DPM disadvantage. Next, the repair kit, just for general repairs, and I personally am using the engine power boost just to get places faster, though of course you could drop this out as this is already a pretty mobile tank and instead use some other repair consumable. In terms of provisions, it's just a normal setup, and I am going with the double food just because I do want to have the best possible DPM with this higher alpha. So in terms of equipment, I would personally go with vents because I do want to maximize on the DPM. That is my choice for this tank. However, if you did want to go with calibrated shells, it's also a perfectly good choice, as this tank's penetration isn't anything crazy impressive. Though in most situations your penetration will be okay, just because this tank already has quite nice accuracy, which can help it to aim for weak points and make up for that penetration. And not that the penetration of this tank is that bad to begin with. For tier 9, pretty average. But for me personally, I do like the better handling, aim time, and of course the reload. Next, engine accelerator, just because this tank has great traverse speed and I would rather have the better power to weight ratio to reach my top speed than to turn a bit faster. Next, improved assembly. Use this if you do want to play the tank as though it has no armor at all, and basically just ignore the armor completely and expect that whenever you take a shot it is going to penetrate. If you do want to rely on the armor a little bit against tier 8 tanks or lower penetration tier 9s, you can use enhanced armor. It does make a difference. So here we can see against the Erich's own 230mm, when you aren't using enhanced armor, the turret has a roughly 50-50 chance whether you penetrate it or not with this 230 penetration. But then using enhanced armor does actually make quite a bit of difference and just pushes it over the level where this 230mm would be able to go through. This is definitely nice for bouncing tier 9 light tanks, medium tanks, and of course almost all tier 8s, at least including heavies, lights and mediums. Tank destroyers might be able to go through, but oh well. But enhanced armor of course doesn't make any difference to the upper plate except ever so slightly on the lower penetration level, as you can see here. But enhanced armor does have its uses if you do want to use that turret a little bit against lower tier enemies. Next, gun lane drive, just because this gun has great aim time, but also its shell velocities are perfectly fine, and I want to try maximize on that aim time and get that down a bit more. Next, refined gun, because this tank has pretty decent gun handling and it really doesn't need any better aim time. Estimated aim time I should say, so I'm going with refined gun, which does just help this tank's snapshot capability and of course aiming in at long range. It does give it that typical German accuracy, as this tank has a great base dispersion of 0.326. But let me show some gameplay of this tank. So I do have two battles of this tank with the 120mm. The first one is going to be on Rockfield. So here you'll see on Rockfield we do have 3 medium and light tanks, so I'm going to be going towards base C because I'm expecting there to be a fair bit of action over on that side. However, the enemies do have 3 tank destroyers, so it might be a bit of a campy game, and you can see our T100 light tank does spot up the entire enemy team right there in one single spot, which is quite good. But here we can see the 183 is going to cross, so I'm here waiting, setting up a shot, and then I do put one in there. And this is a nice thing about the buffed alpha, 433 damage. The previous 360 alpha would have struggled to do that. I'm not even sure if it was possible for the previous 360 alpha to do that. But now the 183 comes out again, so I put in another shot of 402. So now I do take a bit of a chance poking with this 183 out there, but he goes back into cover, so I use this tank's great dispersion on the Jagdpanzer, and you can see that .268 dispersion with the vents and refined gun does allow me to hit that Jagdpanzer's very rear hatch quite easily. Now here I'm making a bit of a risky play. I'm hoping the 183 doesn't react in time after I shoot, but unfortunately he was fast enough and he just manages to clip my lower plate. Any higher than that he would have ricocheted off the upper plate of this tank. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to go towards this side and try to deal with Shah and 60 TP. So I am rolling pretty average now, doing 380 these shots, but that is a pretty nice thing about this tank. Its DPM isn't the best, but its alpha definitely is a noticeable increase over the normal 350 that most other medium tanks do have. So despite that, you know, previously its DPM was terrible, now it is just slightly better, and it does make enough of a difference. So now I'm essentially going around in the middle of this field trying to dodge being in the middle of 3 enemies, but now the 60 TP is distracted, I can come around and put in a shot into his side. But throughout this game you can also see this tank doesn't really miss. It is truly very accurate and its gun handling is very nice, especially considering its 380 alpha. Other tanks in tier 9 generally are already pretty accurate, but most of them don't have this level of alpha damage, so it does make this one feel pretty unique in terms of how it feels. Of course, also with the 8 gun depression, that is something the WZ-120 doesn't have, and unlike the Cobra, this one has good mobility. So really the Erich now has been elevated to something actually pretty unique and actually worth playing, even with this 120mm gun, which generally I think players aren't going to use because the draw of a 500 alpha autoloader is just too much. So you can see there I was trying to wait for the Hori, see if he would turn towards me to get another shot in. Unfortunately he didn't, so I just shot and got his gun crit. But now I'm going to use this tank's good mobility to try and get around the back of the Hori as he just completely reverses up. Our T100 is also going to try go in and luckily distracts the Hori for me while he still aims forward. I'm able to go in and get a side shot. In that game, 3,600 damage, second class mastery, so I make around 54,000 credits. Of course, without any credit booster, it is worth noting. But in the next battle, it is on Normandy. For this one, again facing tier 10 tanks, but as the enemies do have quite a few medium and lights, I'm going to be rushing towards the middle area. Once again, notice this tank, it does have pretty nice mobility. Similar to the other German mediums of the Leopard line, but not quite as fast, of course, because this one does have a little bit more armor. But you can see I am able to get up this hill towards the middle of the map quite quickly and try put in early shots. Unfortunately though, with the T100 there, I don't want to poke because there might be many enemies at the back, and yep, there they are. So here, all I can really do is just wait. My turret armor in this situation isn't good enough to be able to bounce the WZ-121 or really the T100, especially if that T100 is using calibrated shells. So I'm just going to relocate, but the Type 61 becomes spotted, so I do decide to go for him. So here you can see just how fast the gun gets aimed in. I'm not even using vertical stabilizer, and that aim time is so good. And of course, because I do have refined gun, my accuracy is amazing. But now the Type 61 is gone, and this side is pretty hard to push. Batchat tells me to retreat, and I do decide to go up towards where the heavy tanks are to support that side. Once again, activating the speed boost to try get up there a bit quicker. So the real difference between this gun and of course the 500 Alpha autoloader, other than obviously the Alpha and the autoloader, is going to be the accuracy. The difference is massive in terms of how effective this gun is at hitting shots compared to the other one. The other one is definitely noticeably inaccurate and slow aiming. Meanwhile, this one, it really generally feels like you don't have to aim most of the time. Like, all your shots will just hit because this gun is just very accurate and quick aiming. Definitely a nice trait, which is kind of like the WZ-120. However, of course, with the added benefits of gun depression, it does make it quite a comfortable, flexible vehicle to use. So here is going to be a shot where I don't know where it goes. Right under the Object 84 without even hitting his bottom plate or his tracks somehow. I'm not sure where that one goes. I do manage to get a shot into the 60 TP though. Again, 400 damage. The previous Alpha of 360 would have struggled much more to do that 400. Then again, 380. Again, the buffed Alpha of this tank being quite helpful compared to previously, where average 20 less would have been just so awkward and really horrible to use. But again, you can see in that game 2,800 damage, second class mastery. Does show the 150 gun, but I was using the 120, and again 86,000 credits, that time with a credit booster on. But yeah, Erich Konzept I. Even with this other gun, the original gun of this tank, it is still worth using, especially after the alpha damage buff. And I do like that they haven't just outright made the 152mm the better gun. This one definitely does have its place. If you do like the more consistent reload, like having the great accuracy of the gun, then that one is definitely the one you should be using compared to the 152. The 152 is good, but of course in different areas. It doesn't have the accuracy, doesn't have the penetration, and of course its DPM is less consistent than this 120mm, which I would say is kind of like a Leopard 1, but just of course much less on the DPM side and a bit more on the armor side. That's how it feels in terms of gameplay, at least for me, with the good alpha damage it has. But yeah, that is the Erich Konzept I with the 120. Thanks for watching.